Hey there! Theo recently released a video in which he reviews my article about my first impressions on Panda CSS. In this article, I compared Tailwind CSS, the styling solution I've been using for years, with Panda CSS, a recent styling solution I first tried to build Xstyle by example. Today, we are going to dive into Panda CSS more deeply. Some criticisms that Theo made are often made by people just discovering Panda CSS, and we will look at them closer to determine if they are relevant or not. Alexandre Stammer, the co-creator of Panda CSS, helped me a lot to prepare the content for this video. I'm wearing my best sweatshirt, and we can start.
It looks like this. Oh, I'm not gonna like this. I'm not gonna like this at all. One of my least favorite things anyone ever did to Tailwind was this awful thing called attributify mode. I hate this. It entirely destroys the thing I was just describing with Tailwind about the Zen mode, because now I have to press enter. Now I have to remember which key is which. Now when I'm like reading through, I have to remember which part I'm on. Like, is this BG or is this border? You don't have any guarantee of order because it could be top, bottom, left, right, anything. I hate this. I agree that having a better context when you're reading through your classes is nice and knowing where things are is important. But that's why the Tailwind Prettier plugin that auto sorts the classes is so good, because they're always the same order, so you don't have to worry about it. It writes the Tailwind for you by making you press the enter key more. The fact that you have to press 15 symbols for everything you want to do. We all agree that pressing underscore, pressing colon, pressing quote, pressing comma, pressing enter, pressing all these things is worse than pressing any of the keys near the middle of your keyboard or spacebar, right? Like, we all agree with that, because the amount I have to maneuver around the keyboard to apply a background color, a border, and a font size is absurd.
Theo doesn't like that you need to create big and nasty objects to create styles with Panda CSS. It doesn't look good for him that you need to create big objects amongst many lines to add a background color, a text color, and a font size. He also points that there are too much characters to type, and those characters are specials. You need to write columns and commas a lot. With Panda CSS, you write your styles in typesafe functions, which allows your code editor to autocomplete the name of your properties. For instance, I never type font size or font variant numeric myself. I let my code editor autocomplete it for me. If I want to set a font size on this element, I'm going to type FTS and wait for my code editor to autocomplete the name of the property. Then I select the value. I do the same if I have a font variant numeric property I want to apply, font variant numeric, and with a few characters, you get the correct autocompletion. The same rule applies for values. If I want to set the text color of this element, I'm going to type color hem100 and it will autocomplete to amber 100. I do the exact same thing when I'm developing with Tailwind CSS. I wait for the Tailwind CSS extension for VS Code to autocomplete the properties and the values. The only difference there is that Panda CSS relies on the TypeScript language server of your code editor, when Tailwind requires you to install on your code editor a specific extension. With Panda CSS, you can group your styles by pseudo-selectors. You don't have to necessarily repeat hover, column, first, column 10 times. You can group all of them on a single object. Let's see what Theo thinks about this.
You can group styles by conditions, large for large breakpoint, or by property. Wait, or? You're winning me over. Looking back at this, because large here makes this very different. I will say it is Panda's fault for me falling for that, because one of these is a subgroup of targets. So in this case, we want the background color to be base 50 gray, on hover to get darker. This is a subsection of different style things I would want to apply. If you are a Tailwind user, this is the thing you'd put for the first two characters at the start of your Tailwind call. This is a viewport selector. These are two very different things, and having them next to each other like this makes it very easy to skim over and not realize that this is an entirely different behavior than what this is. These are properties, these are media queries. They shouldn't be the same index level. You can convince me in Tailwind that media query selectors aren't great, especially the idea of doing things in groups like that. The auto sort helps a ton here because if you have multiple things prefixed with large, they all get bumped to be in a group together. But you could also convince me something like Tailwind helper equals this, where I have LG colon BG gray 200 flex column and different behaviors where you have this helper. This can even be part of Tailwind merge where you have the media queries out as the keys and then the value is the properties. But having the keys intermixing properties and media queries makes it so I can't really rely on that. The other scary part here is that the order can be changed and you can do really nasty stuff that makes the code review here miserable. Like you can put this there. That's cursed. This went from perceivably easier to review to significantly harder to review with that one small thing. Theoretically, a prettier plugin could force that these are at the top or the bottom, which is where I'd probably want them at the top so they're clearly called out there. But if you're using these, I would want it to have to be under some other key. Like, here's what I would do. Have default, have this always apply, or even base might make more sense for this. But this being at the same level, I hate this.
Theo doesn't like that the BG CSS property and the LG breakpoint are defined at the same depth level in the object. He is scared that it could make the CSS harder to understand. Theo emphasizes that with the plugin Prettier for Tailwind CSS, styles are ordered and even grouped, which make them easier to understand and predictable. Theo says that he would have preferred a way with Panda CSS to declare the best style, the medium style, large style, etc. Panda CSS is flexible and you can group styles in many different ways. You can group styles by the style property. We have the background, we set the base style, the hover style and the focus style. You can also group by conditional styles. We have the focus group, which defines the PG and the font size. We also have the hover group, which defines hover styles. We can mix both. We define the PG, the focus and the hover style for the PG, and then breakpoints SM and MD, where we define hover styles, even the hover style for the PG when we are on a small device. Honestly, I never wrote something like this. It's possible with Panda CSS, but it doesn't mean you need to do this. So it's up to you to reach this state. And yes, it's possible, but absolutely not recommended. Theo mentioned that he would like a way to group the best styles in a single object. And it's available in Panda CSS. You have this base property. You can wrap all your best styles in there. And yes, it works in Panda CSS. These are matter of taste. What really matters, as Theo says, is that you use automatic tool to enforce your coding styles. Tailwind CSS has a VS Code extension and a Prettier plugin. The Panda team has recently developed a plugin for Prettier and Panda. It sorts your styles. If I go back to my playground and set font size of 2 pixels, a position absolute, and a display flex. If I save the file, you can see that properties are ordered by the Prettier plugin. The Pandas team has also developed an ESLint plugin. The objective is to spot the misusages of Panda CSS and warn you about them. For instance, if I set a color and I don't use all the specific colors defined by my configuration of Panda, if I use for instance this, it will warn me and it will tell me to use a color token that is valid. In the video, Theo talks about how Tailwind CSS detects which styles you use to generate the CSS only for this. It reduces the bundle size of your CSS. How Tailwind does this is by searching for the exact class name as strings in your codebase. So if you have this code in your Tailwind application, it won't detect nor generate which styles you want to use because color is dynamic. Tailwind CSS won't evaluate or parse your code. It just searches for strings. On the other hand, Panda CSS uses a static extractor which transforms your code into an abstract syntax tree, an AST. It is able to determine which styles you use in a more powerful way. For example, Panda CSS supports this. In the CSS function, we define the color, and based on the runtime isSelected state, we either apply the blue 500 or the yellow 500 color. And because your code is transformed into an abstract syntax tree, Panda CSS is able to generate both text colors for blue and yellow. It can also support this. In the CSS function, we spread the base object, which references the colors blue here. And again, based on a runtime state that is selected, we either spread the selected object defined there and using again the colors object, or we spread this static object. This doesn't look really static, and Panda is still able to do it. The rule of thumb with the static extractor is that if you can identify what will be the value of a property, then Panda will be able to. You shouldn't leave the file because the static extractor remains on the file the CSS function is defined within. Panda CSS remains a build-time CSS in JS solution, so don't expect it to work with two runtime-ish solutions. You can always use a CSS variable if you need some runtime value to become styles. Theo wonders how we could share styles across CVAs.
This is nice that there's this level of like deep variant behaviors built in where you can still use these chunks. My question would be how much composability exists here? Like how easy is it for me to define the color in BG as a value that is type safe and then use that in multiple CVA variant sets in different places?
Panda CSS supports two types of tokens. Core tokens like color spacings, also available in Tailwind CSS, and semantic tokens. Semantic tokens are meta tokens that reference core tokens and can have conditions like for the theme. A semantic token is able to reference a certain core token on the light theme and another core token in the dark theme. Druids is a design system of Datadog, and they define some colors like UI background secondary, UI text secondary. If we switch to the dark mode, you can see that the name remains the same, but the color has changed. This is because if they were using Panda CSS, they would be using semantic tokens. To re-implement these colors from Druids, we need to go to the configuration of Panda, define the theme semantic tokens. We can define the colors. There are other types of semantic tokens we can define like animations, borders, etc. We need colors. I will nest all of these tokens under the UI property. I define the background semantic token, which has a default value. When we access UI background, this is what will happen. So the base value for the light mode is white, and for the dark mode it will be a dark gray. Same for the secondary, light gray, dark gray. And for the text it's the opposite. So a dark gray for the light mode and a light gray for the dark mode. In the React code we have this theme management. If we apply this theme there to the elements, it would be set globally in a real project to the HTML element like with Tailwind. And then we can define the BG with UI background. We can also use secondary. There is auto-compilation there. And for the text, we use a color property and UI text or UI text secondary, which is used for the button. And this renders this result. So this is the dark mode. this is a light mode. The code doesn't change, so this is not in the view, but we manage the switch between the dark mode and the light mode for the colors. It's designed by the design system. It's chosen by designers and implemented with Panda CSS thanks to semantic tokens. Theo doesn't like that you can use your styles as JSX components.
And you just grab this by using their styled helper. Wait, does this just create a component with styled? No. Is this styled components? No, you don't have to do that. Just make me apply this as CSS. No, I hate this. So close, so close. They had me until you have a weird syntax for defining JSX. Ugh, we were so close, guys.
Panda CSS has JSX support, which means several things. The first one is that you can use a style function to create HTML elements like a button and style this button with JSX properties like the PG, color, and etc. Contrary to what I said in my blog post, you don't necessarily have to create a CVA first before creating a JSX component from it. You can directly use the style function, define a button in this case, the base style, the variants, etc. And you can use the button component, specify the variants, and you can even override styles like margin top. This way to override styles is optional. You can configure it, and if you don't want to be able to override styles, you can disable this property. I can understand that you might dislike this feature. People coming from Chakra UI or Theme UI will like it because this is what they are used to use. This feature is optional and it is disabled by default. By default, there is no JSS involved. This is something you need to opt in. Panda CSS supports the generation of components for React, Vue, Quick, Solid, and a lot more of frameworks. And yes, you can use it however you want in your project, or absolutely not. Contrary to what my article suggested, you can use CVA without any JSX involved. You can import the CVA function, define your class variance authority with the base styles, the variants, and then use the app page CVA to return classes names. So you apply the variance, you call the function, and you get your CVA without any JSX. Panda CSS comes with a lot of utility functions to solve common layout problems like cycle, H-tag, grid flex. You can import them from the pattern file. You can use a vstack, pass some properties like the gap, and you get a vertical stack. You can import the grid, specify the number of columns, the gap between each column and row, and you get a CSS grid. If you enable the JSX mode in your project, you also get these patterns as components. You import them from the JSX file, and you get stack, circle, grid, flex. You can then use them as a foundation for your website and style those components through properties. Theo doesn't like the verbosity of slot recipes, aka SVA. He feels that they will become nasty and deeply nested objects which are just unmaintainable.
I once again have feelings. This feels like it would get really nasty in the nesting really quickly. And again, I don't think everything needs to be done in an object when it could be done in markup. Like this is what's kind of confusing to me. Like, how often would you reuse this recipe? I feel like if I wrote this, it would be for one component and all these things would be applied in that one component. At which point I would be just as happy with 3 of these, one for root, one for control, one for label, that are way less deeply nested and way more readable. I would personally much rather scroll up and down to these different element types to see how they're defined in the different conditions than to blend portions of them so deeply together like this.
I agree that slot recipes may be overkill for most cases. However, their true power is when you have several slots and some compound variants. I found an excellent example on Tailwind variants, which implements slot recipes. So, on the documentation of Tailwind variants, we can find these slots with compound variants. We have this alert component, which has 2 variants, severity and variant. Severity is either success or error, and the variant is either filled or outlined. You can see that the color changed there. And obviously, they also change due to the severity. They implemented this like that, so TV, tailwind variants. They define some slots, the road, the title, the message. The variants are variants and severity, either outline or filled, and error or success. And here are the compound variants. So if the variant is outlined and the severity is error, we need to set a bunch of classes to the road, the title, the message. And all these classes change based on the combination of these two variants. So when you need something like a cross product for these variants, compound variants, this is their name, I think that SVA are an excellent way to implement this. Honestly, I don't think there would be a better way to do this. Following the rule that everything that changes together should be kept at the same place, I think that slot recipes are the best tool to solve this problem. Obviously, you don't need to use slot recipes for everything, and everything doesn't have to be a slot in a slot recipe. For instance, for this checkbox, which has a road control label, I don't want to make this hidden checkbox a slot in the SVA. If it's only to set answer only to true, I might better do it outside of the SVA. As every feature that Panda CSS supports, you don't have to use slot recipes. Many users of Panda CSS will use it for years, and they will never use slot recipes. It's absolutely not a problem. You can use what you want from this big toolbox that Panda CSS is, and be fine with it. Flexibility is never a problem for a tool if it gives a simple and straightforward path to beginners. The team behind Panda CSS has understood this criticism about too much flexibility and is working to solve it. First, there is now this ESLint and Prettier plugins. They make it way safer to work in teams with Panda CSS. Second, there will soon be a lot more of opt-ins in Panda CSS. You will have to opt in for more advanced features instead of them being the default. If you like the simplicity of Tailwind CSS and don't want to use more advanced features like CVA and SVA, you can just use the CSS function and benefit from the strong types, the merging styles feature, and the advanced static extractor. Thanks for watching, but before leaving me, I want you to go to the documentation of Panda CSS. It's well written and it contains a lot more information than what I can give you. If you want to judge Panda fairly, you need to go to the documentation. Most of the code samples you saw today come from the documentation. The creators of the library make an excellent work to help people use Panda effectively. And thanks to you, Theo, for having made a video about my article. I am most honored. Thanks to Alexandre Stamer for his help on this video and his hard work on Panda CSS. So, bye!